There is a version of you right now in your 20s or your 30s who is already broke at 55. Not because you will lose your job, not because the market crashes. You will be broke because of a decision you're about to make in the next 12 months, and you will not even clock it as a financial decision when you make it. It will feel like a relationship, a car, a favor for a friend, a city you moved to because your college roommate lived there. Nobody sends you a warning label when a decision is secretly a $200,000 decision. That is the part nobody talks about. The wealth killers that actually end careers and marriages and net worths are not reckless. They are reasonable sounding. They are the ones your parents would approve of. My name is Chris. I have spent years studying why smart, hardworking people still end up starting over financially in their 40s and 50s, and I will tell you the honest version right now. It is almost never one big mistake. It is one quiet decision repeated for 20 years without anyone checking the math. If you want to see these traps before you are standing in the middle of one, subscribe and hit the like button, because today we are going deep on the ones almost nobody puts in one place. Here is the belief I want to leave you with, because it will change how you make decisions for the next 10 years. Wealth is not destroyed by expenses. It is destroyed by timelines you did not choose on purpose. Like a car payment does not ruin you. A car payment you did not think about for 6 years ruins you. A friend needing help does not ruin you. Co-signing without a plan ruins you. Every killer on this list has the same fingerprint. A decision that felt small in the moment and huge on a 20-year clock. I am calling this the 20-year tax. Say it in your head a few times, because I'm going to keep coming back to it, and by the end, you will start seeing it everywhere in your own life. Quick question before we start, and be honest with yourself. If your income doubled tomorrow, would your net worth actually grow, or would your life just get more expensive at the same rate? Most people answer that question wrong, and the wrong answer is the reason this video exists. Let's start with the one almost nobody frames as a financial decision at all: where you live. Most people do not choose their city. They inherit it. You grew up somewhere, your friends stayed, so you stayed. That feels like loyalty. It is actually the single most expensive default most people ever accept, because your city sets the ceiling on your income before you have written a single sentence of a resume. I look at the actual gap. Median household income in Kansas City sits around $69,000 a year. Move to Austin, and that median jumps to roughly $90,000. Move to San Francisco, and it is over $135,000. That is not a 10 or 20% difference. In some cases, you are talking about nearly double for the same job in the same industry at the same experience level. Even after higher rent, the math still tilts hard toward the higher income city, because rent does not scale as fast as salary once you pass a certain income band. There is an economic term for this, and it is one of my favorite concepts in all of personal finance. Geographic arbitrage. Along the Swiss-Italian border, workers cross daily from Italy into Switzerland because Swiss wages are dramatically higher, then take that paycheck back across the border into a much cheaper cost of living. Same skill set, same hours, radically different outcome purely based on which side of an invisible line they clock in on. You do not need to move to another country to use this. You just need to stop pretending that the city you happen to be in is the city that pays you the most. And here's the part that compounds the hardest, and the part nobody warns you about. Your first salary becomes the anchor for every negotiation after it. Recruiters ask what you currently make. Your next raise is a percentage of your current number. Start $20,000 below what the same role pays somewhere else, and you are not down $20,000 once. You are down a percentage of $20,000 compounding for the next 30 years of raises. You can always move home once you are established. Building your entire foundation in a low opportunity market by default, simply because it is familiar, is one of the quietest wealth killers there is. Now let's flip the emotion completely, because this next one hides inside good behavior instead of bad behavior, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous. Overfunding your emergency reserve. The standard advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash, and that is genuinely sound. But I personally know people sitting on $80,000, $100,000, even $167,000 in a savings account, well beyond any reasonable emergency scenario. It feels responsible. It feels safe. What it actually is money frozen out of compounding. Run the numbers with me. Monthly expenses of $4,000. A 6-month cushion is $24,000. A 16-month cushion is $64,000. That extra $40,000 sitting in a high yield account earning around 3.5% instead of being invested at a historical market average closer to 8 or 9% is not just sitting there safely. Over 20 years, that gap can cost you in the neighborhood of $145,000 in growth you never got to have. I want to be blunt about this one. That is not caution. That is a slow leak dressed up as discipline, and it is one of the hardest wealth killers to fix because it feels like the opposite of a mistake. Now, here is one where I need to correct something almost every finance video, including some of mine, has gotten wrong for years. You have probably heard that half of all marriages end in divorce. It is one of the most repeated statistics in this entire niche, and it is outdated. The real 2026 data tells a different story. The divorce rate has actually fallen to one of its lowest points in 50 years, and first marriages today end in divorce closer to 41% of the time, not 50, with that number still declining. So why is divorce still on this list at all? Because the number that did not improve is the one for second and third marriages. Those still fail at rates around 60 and 70%. The data is actually kinder than the scare stat suggests, but it is also more specific about where the real risk lives. Getting it right once matters more than the old headline ever captured, and getting it wrong twice is still exactly as expensive as it always was. I am not married myself, so I am not lecturing anyone on relationships from personal authority here. But I watched my father go through 3 divorces, and every single time it reset him financially. He told me directly he would be dramatically wealthier today if he had never gotten divorced even once. The direct legal cost alone is often north of $20,000. The hidden costs are what actually gut a net worth. Refinancing a house at whatever rate happens to exist that year, selling in a bad market because you are forced to, not because you chose to. Splitting retirement accounts through court orders, sometimes triggering taxes and penalties, splitting a business that was built during the marriage. Added up, and $50,000 to $100,000 in total cost is common, sometimes far more. Who you choose to build a life with is still one of the most financially consequential decisions you will ever make. Let's talk about a habit so small, most people never even question it, which is exactly why it might be the most expensive item on this entire list. Skipping your 401k match. If your job offers a retirement plan with an employer match, that match typically runs somewhere around 4 to 6% of your salary, and it is one of the only guaranteed returns that exists anywhere in personal finance, not stocks, not real estate. Guaranteed. If your employer would match $3,750 a year and you never contribute enough to claim it, that unclaimed match, left invested for 30 years at a normal market return, can quietly cost you north of $125,000 in retirement money you were already owed and simply never collected. Nobody feels this loss in the moment because there is no bill, no debt, no visible cost. It just silently never shows up, which is exactly why it never gets fixed. Here is a phrase that has stuck around for decades because it is just true. Keeping up with the Joneses. Except now, it is not just your literal neighbor, it is everyone's curated highlight reel on a screen you check 40 times a day. There is a term for the extreme version of this, the 30K millionaire, someone earning $30,000 a year who spends like they are earning millions because appearance has become the entire strategy. They will pay for the VIP table at a club and then cannot afford a single drink once they're sitting at it. I am not exaggerating for effect. That is a literal common pattern, and if you have ever been to a club, you have met this person without knowing their bank balance. Here is the part that should sting a little. The people who look rich are frequently the least financially secure people in the room, and the people who are actually wealthy are often the hardest to spot. The leased car, the borrowed outfit, the apartment eating 60% of someone's take-home pay so it photographs well. None of that shows up in a bank statement, and none of it builds anything. And this connects to something psychologists actually have a name for, the hedonic treadmill. When your income rises, your baseline for what feels normal rises with it almost immediately, and the upgrade that felt exciting for a month becomes invisible to you within a year, while the higher bill it created stays permanently. Researchers have even found that beyond a certain income level, additional spending stops meaningfully moving the needle on day-to-day happiness at all. So the raise arrives, the lifestyle expands to match it automatically, the happiness barely moves, and the only thing that actually changed is that your net worth stayed exactly where it was. This is the real mechanism behind people earning $100,000 or $150,000 a year who still feel like they are living paycheck to paycheck. It is rarely just inflation. It is the raise and the lifestyle increase landing on the same day every time, by habit instead of by decision. Let me tell you about someone I will call Dana, a composite of a pattern I have watched play out with more than one person over the years. Dana co-signed a car loan for a sibling in her mid-20s out of genuine love, no hesitation, no paperwork beyond a signature. The sibling missed 4 payments over the following 2 years during a rough patch. Dana never missed a payment on anything in her life. 3 years later, Dana applied for a mortgage on a starter home and got denied. Not because of her own credit history, but because of a repayment record attached to her file that she never actually controlled. Here is the legal mechanism most people never learn until it costs them something. When you co-sign, you are not a guarantor standing behind the loan in some abstract sense. You become a joint borrower with full, equal, primary legal liability for every payment from day one, regardless of who actually drives the car. Lenders do not distinguish between you and the person you were trying to help. Your credit file does not either. Now, here is a second story, because the equity mistake deserves one too, and it is the one I personally think about the most. I know someone I will call Marcus, another composite drawn from a pattern I have seen repeatedly. Marcus got an offer from an early stage company, higher salary option or lower salary with meaningfully more equity. He took the cash because rent was due, and equity felt theoretical. 4 years later, that company had a real exit. The coworker who took the equity option, doing the identical job at the identical level, walked away with a number that would take Marcus over a decade of salary to match. Marcus did not make a bad decision. He made the decision that felt safest in the moment, which is exactly the trap. Here is a term worth knowing if you ever face that same choice. Most equity offers come with a vesting cliff, typically around 1 year, meaning you own 0% of what you were promised until you have actually stayed that long, and then it unlocks gradually after that. The risk in equity is not the equity itself. It is walking away from a role before the cliff, or walking away from the offer entirely because the number on day one looks smaller than the cash option. If you ever get that same option, a higher salary or more equity, understand what you are actually trading away by defaulting to cash. A single strong equity outcome can outperform an entire decade of base salary. That does not mean take equity blindly. You have to actually diligence the company and understand your vesting schedule. But do not reflexively pick the number that hits your checking account fastest just because it feels safer today. Figure out what percentage of the company your shares represent, which you can request from HR or legal, then estimate what the company could realistically be worth at a future liquidity event. Own 0.1% of a company that exits at $100 million, and that stake is worth $100,000. Most people never run this math, and Marcus is proof of what that costs. Here's a claim I want you to actually argue with instead of just accepting. Waiting for the market to feel safe before you invest is, statistically, one of the most expensive habits a person can develop. Take $10,000 invested in the S&P 500 from 1996 through 2025, fully invested the entire time. That grows to roughly $192,000. Miss just the 10 best days in that entire 29-year stretch, and your gains drop by 56%. Miss the 20 best days, and you are down 74%. Miss the 30 best days, and you have given up 84% of the growth. Here is what should actually bother you about that. The best days almost always show up right after the scariest days, the exact moment most people have already pulled their money out because it felt too risky to stay in. I want to introduce a term here, sunk cost loyalty. It is staying at a job past its usefulness because it is familiar, because you like your coworkers, because leaving feels disloyal, even when the math says you are leaving real money on the table every year you stay. Picture someone starting at $60,000 a year, getting a 3% raise every 2 years. 10 years later, they are sitting at roughly $70,000. That is a decade of loyalty for a $10,000 total gain. Companies are not adversaries, but they are also not going to volunteer money you do not ask for. According to a lending tree analysis of job switchers, workers who changed employers saw average earnings jump over 11%, and in plenty of cases over 30% in a single move. Let's pause here for a second because I want you to notice something. Every wealth killer so far has been about a decision you made once and then stopped thinking about. The next three are about decisions you make every single month without noticing you are making them at all. And honestly, those might be the ones worth rewinding this video for. Debt itself is not the villain, so let's be precise about which kind actually does the damage. A mortgage on a home that appreciates or a student loan for a degree that actually pays for itself can be a reasonable use of leverage. The debt that kills wealth is high-interest consumer debt. Credit cards, above all. The average credit card APR sits right around 21% as of this year, according to Federal Reserve data. On a $10,000 balance, that is close to $175 a month in interest alone. Money that produces absolutely nothing and simply evaporates. While we are on the subject of debt that is sometimes worth it and sometimes is not, here is the one almost every 20-something is told is automatically good debt without qualification. Student loans. The average bachelor's degree graduate now leaves school owing around $30,000, and that number climbs fast for anyone stacking a master's degree on top without a clear plan for what it actually unlocks. The mistake is not borrowing for school. The mistake is never asking whether the extra year, the extra degree, or the private school price tag changes your income enough to justify it. 2 years at a community college before transferring gets you the same first 60 credit hours for a fraction of the cost, and no employer has ever once asked a candidate where they took freshman biology. A car is one of the most disguised wealth killers there is because the payment is only the visible part. Insurance, maintenance, depreciation, and fuel all stack on top of it quietly. According to Experian's most recent auto finance data, the average new car payment is now $770 a month. Invest that same amount instead at an average 8% return, and in 10 years, you are looking at more than $213,000. Now, the fair pushback is that you still need to get to work, so it is not fair to compare that to just not having a car. Compare it properly instead. The same Experian data puts the average used car payment at $531 a month, about $239 less than new. Invest that $239 difference monthly over 10 years, and you are still looking at roughly $50,000 for driving essentially the same commute in a car that is 3 or 4 years old instead of brand new off the lot. And last on the list, the one that is easiest to dismiss because no single instance feels significant, small recurring social spending. $200 a month at a bar or a club is about $2,400 a year. Over 10 years, that is $24,000 spent directly. And had that same amount been invested instead, it could realistically be worth closer to $40,000 or more by the end of that decade. The money is only half the cost. The hours spent are the other half, and those hours do not come back at any interest rate. So look back at everything we just covered, and the 20-year tax shows up in every single one. The city you did not choose, the emergency fund you never revisited, the marriage math you misunderstood in both directions, the match you never claimed, the image you spent money maintaining, the equity Marcus traded for comfort before he ever understood his own vesting cliff, the market timing that cost you the best days, the loyalty that never got rewarded, the debt, both the credit card kind and the student loan kind, that quietly compounded against you instead of for you. The signature Dana gave someone else without knowing it made her a joint borrower on somebody else's mistake. The car payment. The nights out that never got questioned. None of these are reckless decisions. That is exactly why they're dangerous. They are the decisions that feel responsible enough that nobody ever goes back and checks the math on them. If any one of these hit close to home, that is not a bad sign. That is the entire point of this video. The goal was never to make you feel behind. It was to make sure you catch these before they have had 10 or 20 years to compound against you instead of for you. If you got value out of this, tell me in the comments which one of these you actually recognized in your own life. I read every single one. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it before they make one of these decisions instead of after, and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next one. If you want to see where this actually leads once you have cleared these traps, go watch why everything changes at 20K right after this, because that is the number where the entire game starts to shift. I will see you in the next one. Peace.